Hi, boys and girls. This is Mr. Yates, and this is the final lesson for math for 5th grade. And what I wanted to do in this lesson is continue on what we've been talking about this week, which is some 6th grade math skills that you'll need to be successful starting in 6th grade. One of the things we've been focusing on this week is about converting fractions into decimals and then decimals back into fractions. And I've been using a phone battery model to show a fraction, and then how do we turn it into a decimal, and then again the decimal into a fraction. Here my phone battery is at 80%, and that is 8 out of 10ths full, or also 8/10ths full. Now the other way you could show my battery, and you see this on your phones, is the percentage, which is 80%. What we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to convert between a decimal to change that into a percent, and then back again, going from percent into a decimal. And then in today's final math assignment, you're going to be changing between fractions, decimals, and percents, all three different ways of basically saying the same thing. That my phone is this much charged, which is 80%, 8/10ths, or 8/10. Let's go ahead and get started with a couple examples, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's pause this right here while I get my examples ready. So boys and girls, what we're going to do is we're going to be showing you how to convert a decimal into a percent. Percent comes from the phrase out of, and cent is 100. So it's out of 100. And the abbreviation for percent is kind of an abbreviation of out of 100. Instead of saying the word out of or per, we just say 0, and we put another 0 here to represent the 100. So it's out of 100. It's sort of a super shortcut way to say percent. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to convert decimals into percents. Now, if you remember from the phone battery that I showed you, I had 8/10ths as the decimal, and 80% was how full it was. So the question is, how do I go from 8/10ths to 80%? Let me show you. There's a very easy trick to do this, and it just involves mental math. To convert any decimal to a percent, you multiply it by 100. And I'll show you how to do that right now without having to do any multiplication, just moving of a decimal. I'm going to take 32/100ths and multiply it by 100. Multiplying by 100 means I just have to move the decimal over the number of spaces in the 100, which are 2. And I'm going to move the decimal over to the right. So now I have 1, 2 spaces to move my decimal. My 32/100ths becomes 32. And at the end of 32, I put the symbol percent. 32 out of 100, or 32% is how full my phone would be at 32%. Now, boys and girls, the next one I want to show you is 0 and 5/10ths. Again, anytime we want to take a decimal and convert it into a percent, we just multiply it by 100. Multiplying by 100 means moving the decimal over to the right 2 spaces. I'm going to annex a 0 here because I want to make it easier to move my decimal. So I'm going to move my decimal over 1, 2 spaces. And now my 5/10ths becomes 50. And I'm going to write it right here, 50%. About halfway full. Here's one more example. I'm going to take the decimal 0 and 7/100ths, and I want to convert it to a percent. In order to do that, I remember that I'm going to convert or multiply by 100. And to multiply by 100, I just have to move the decimal over 2 spaces to the right. And I won't need to annex 0. In fact, I want to get rid of these zeros over here because I won't need them on the left side. My 7/100ths just becomes 7, and then I add my percent sign. And those are a couple examples of how to turn a decimal into percent. Next step, we're going to show you how to convert the percent into a decimal, which is even easier. Okay, now in this part, we're going to be converting percents into decimals. And like I said, it's even easier this way than converting decimals into percent. Let me show you. Let's say, for example, we have 7%. How do we turn that back into a decimal? Well, The key here is to first turn it into a fraction, and then it's very, very easy to turn it into a decimal. Let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to put a little fraction space in here between the percent and the decimal to remind myself I want to turn it into a fraction first. To turn 7% into a decimal, I want to first turn it into a fraction. Now, if you remember, the key here is that percent means out of 100. That 100 is the key number. Every time I want to turn a percent into a fraction, then into a decimal, I'm going to take that number and put it over 100. And that's it. That's all I have to do to turn a percent into a fraction, which will make it really easy to turn into a decimal. Let me show you. The first thing I do to turn this percent into a fraction is I'm going to put a fraction bar. And remember, percents are out of 100. This fraction is going to show out of 100 also. I'm putting the denominator as 100 at the bottom of my fraction bar. The next thing I do is I take my 7, and that becomes my numerator. I don't take the percent sign along with me. So now my 7% becomes 7 out of 100, which is actually what a percent is right here. 7 out of 100, or 7%. They're the same thing. Now that I've got it as a fraction, though, I can really easily turn it into a decimal just by reading it out loud. 7 hundredths. Oh yeah, I can write that really easy. 0 and 7 hundredths. So now I've converted my percent, 7%, into a fraction, 7 over 100, and then into a decimal, 7 hundredths. Let me show you 2 more examples, and I think you'll get the gist of it. Let's say, for example, I have 42%, and I want to turn that into a decimal. What I first want to do is turn this percent into a fraction. The fraction is going to have a denominator of out of 100. Out of 100 is a percent, and we're going to put the 100 right here as my denominator. Then I take 42, and I place it over the 100. I don't include the percent sign anymore. Now I have a fraction of 42 out of 100. And when I read it out loud another way, 42 hundredths, I've got my decimal. 0 and 42 hundredths. We'll do one more. We'll take 65%. You remember, we're going to convert it into a fraction, then a decimal. Remember that percent means out of 100, and that means our fraction is also going to be out of 100. 100 will be my denominator. 65 will be my numerator. I don't use the percent sign. I put 65 on top, 65 out of 100, or 65 hundredths. And that means I have turned this into a decimal very easily by writing it as 65 hundredths. And that's all there is to it. Converting a percent to a fraction to a decimal. And that's all you need to do, boys and girls. This should give you enough to get started with assignment 6.03. There is one more video I'm going to post that shows you a little bit of an idea of how to do the assignment itself. There's a few things you may need to know about it. And if you have any questions, just please email me and I'll be able to help you. Thank you, boys and girls.